It was just another busy Monday morning at Jefferson International Airport, one of the busiest hubs in the country. The usual sounds filled the air. Suitcase wheels rolling across tiled floors, last-minute boarding calls, and the occasional child crying in the background. The departure gate for Flight 482 to Dallas was crowded with passengers from all walks of life. Everyone just trying to get to their next destination. Among them was a tall, sharply dressed black man in his early 40s. Nothing about him stood out at first glance. He was calm, quiet, and stood in line like everyone else, waiting to board. He held a sleek black carry-on in one hand and his passport in the other. He looked like a businessman, maybe someone flying for work. Nobody knew who he really was, yet. As the line crept forward, something strange happened. When it was finally his turn to approach the gate agent, a middle-aged woman with a sharp bob haircut and a clipped tone, looked him up and down. She didn't smile. She didn't greet him. Instead, she held out her hand impatiently and said, "Passport." He handed it over without a word. She opened it, stared at it for a few seconds, then gave him a hard, suspicious look. "This doesn't look real," she said bluntly. The man raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, you heard me. This passport looks fake," she replied, her voice louder this time, loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. People in the line started looking up, sensing something wasn't right. "Ma'am, that passport was issued directly by the State Department," he said calmly, trying to keep the situation from escalating. "I travel frequently for work." But she wasn't interested in hearing it. Without warning, and without scanning it, checking a second opinion, or following proper airline protocol, the gate agent tore the passport right down the middle, ripping it in two with a look of smug satisfaction on her face. The sound of the paper tearing was loud. Sharp. It cut through the ambient noise of the terminal like a knife. Gasps rang out behind him. Passengers froze in place. A woman standing a few feet away whispered, Did she really just rip his passport?" A young man pulled out his phone and started recording. The black man stood still, almost in disbelief, as pieces of his official U.S. passport fluttered to the floor. Then came the worst part. The gate agent smirked and said, "Well, now you're definitely not flying today." And just like that, she turned her back to him, as if dismissing him from the flight entirely. That's when everything changed. He didn't yell. He didn't lose his temper. He simply bent down, picked up the torn pieces of his passport, reached into the front pocket of his bag, and pulled out a slim leather wallet. From it, he revealed a silver badge and a federal ID. The look on the gate agent's face was instant regret. "I'm Michael Hawkins," he said in a calm but commanding voice. "I'm with the FAA on official inspection duty. This entire interaction has been recorded for evidence. I suggest you alert your supervisor immediately." Boom. Just like that, the whole energy shifted. Everyone around went quiet. The same passengers who had been quietly watching suddenly realized what had just happened. This wasn't just a bad interaction. This wasn't just rude customer service. This was a federal violation, destroying government-issued ID, racially profiling a traveler, and obstructing an aviation inspector on duty. The gate agent's hands began to shake. Airport security began rushing toward the scene, and the man she had dismissed as just another passenger, he was about to become her worst mistake. The man standing calmly at that gate, now holding up a federal badge, wasn't just any traveler. He was a top-tier FAA inspector. His name? Michael D. Hawkins, and his job is one most people have no idea even exists. Michael works for the Federal Aviation Administration, and his role is both critical and secretive. As a senior aviation safety inspector, he's one of the few entrusted with conducting covert operations across airports in the U.S., traveling undercover to assess how airlines and airport staff treat passengers, follow regulations, and uphold civil rights policies. That's right. Sometimes the man next to you in line at security isn't just another traveler. He could be watching, taking notes, testing the system. And on that particular day, Michael had been assigned a special mission. Over the past year, the FAA had received multiple reports from travelers, mostly people of color, who claimed they'd been treated unfairly at Jefferson International Airport by specific airline staff. The allegations were disturbing. Racial profiling, hostile language, unnecessary document questioning, and in a few shocking cases, even denial of boarding without cause. Michael volunteered to go in person. He booked a ticket under a fake name, a standard protocol for inspectors, and traveled light, dressed casually. He purposely chose a flight operated by the airline that had received the most complaints. His goal was simple: observe the check-in and boarding process, interact naturally with staff, and document whether those reports had any truth behind them. But he didn't expect to be the one targeted. From the moment he approached the boarding gate, he noticed the signs. The gate agent wasn't behaving the same way she had with the passengers before him. She didn't scan his boarding pass with the same ease. She questioned the authenticity of his passport, something he hadn't seen her do to anyone else. And when she ripped it in half, right in front of him, Michael knew this wasn't just rudeness. This was personal. And even more troubling, she had no idea what kind of mistake she had just made. This wasn't Michael's first undercover mission. In fact, over the years, he had conducted dozens of inspections across multiple cities. He was known among FAA officials for staying calm, blending in, and catching problems that others overlooked. But never, not once, had someone destroyed his identification in front of a crowd. For Michael, this was no longer just an inspection. It was a real-time case of abuse of power, and he had just become a direct victim of the very behavior he was there to investigate. The badge he revealed wasn't just for show. It was a federal ID linked directly to the FAA, backed by Department of Transportation Authority. It gave him legal standing not only to conduct inspections, but to take immediate enforcement actions if necessary. What made Michael's presence even more significant was his role in civil rights enforcement within aviation operations, a specific initiative launched by the FAA to ensure equal treatment of all passengers regardless of race, gender, or background. In that moment, he had witnessed and experienced a civil rights violation in real time, and he had everything he needed to escalate it. The most ironic part of this entire story? The gate agent had assumed he was just another passenger trying to argue his way onto a flight. But instead, she had directly interfered with a federal operation, destroyed official documentation, and violated civil rights protocols, all in the span of a few minutes. What she thought was a show of authority became, for her, a career-ending move. And Michael Hawkins? He was just getting started. The moment Michael D. Hawkins pulled out his federal badge and calmly announced his identity, it was as if the entire terminal hit pause. People nearby stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the boarding announcements seemed to fade into the background. The gate agent, who had just confidently ripped up his passport moments earlier, now stood frozen. Her smug expression wiped clean, replaced by confusion, then fear. "I'm with the FAA," Michael said, firmly. "This incident is being documented as part of an official federal inspection. I'm requesting your supervisor immediately." Those words hit like a hammer. Passengers nearby began recording in earnest now. Some whispered, "He's with the government," while others just stared, stunned. The gate agent, still processing what had just happened, stammered something about not knowing and just doing her job, but the damage was already done. Within minutes, airport security and a shift supervisor rushed to the gate, alerted by both bystanders and the sudden radio call from the panicked gate agent herself. She tried to explain the situation, but her voice was shaky, her words jumbled. Michael, on the other hand, remained cool and professional. He explained what had happened in calm, measured terms, from the moment she questioned his legitimacy, to her refusal to verify the passport properly, and finally to the act of physically destroying it. That's when the supervisor realized they had a serious problem on their hands. And it wasn't just a customer service issue, it was a federal violation. You see, a U.S. passport isn't just a travel document, it's federal property. Ripping it up is not only an outrageous act of misconduct, but could also be classified as destruction of government-issued identification. Under certain conditions, that's punishable by fines, termination, or even criminal charges. Add to that the fact that the passport belonged to an on-duty FAA inspector, and the situation escalated from serious to catastrophic for the employee involved. The airline's management team was contacted immediately. Michael provided his credentials, details of his inspection assignment, and evidence, including the remains of his torn passport and witness testimony from multiple passengers who had observed the entire incident. Some even offered to send their phone footage to assist in the investigation. At this point, the gate agent was escorted away by security, not arrested, but removed from her position on the spot, pending a full review. She didn't say a word. Her face was pale. She knew this wasn't going away quietly. Meanwhile, Michael was escorted to a private area to complete his boarding through a different gate. But instead of boarding his flight immediately, he spent the next several hours meeting with FAA and airport authorities to file a formal incident report. The story didn't stay quiet for long. By the next day, videos from the scene had gone viral on social media, particularly TikTok and Twitter/X. One clip showed the moment the gate agent ripped the passport, followed by the exact moment Michael revealed his badge. The caption read, "She thought he was just another black man. Turns out he was the FAA." The post racked up millions of views in hours. News outlets picked up the story, and hashtags like #PassportGate, #FAInspector, and #FlyingWhileBlack started trending. Public reaction was swift and fierce. People called for the airline to be held accountable, not just for this one incident, but for the deeper systemic issues it exposed. Why was a gate agent so quick to judge, so confident in destroying a passport without proper cause? What kind of environment had allowed this behavior to go unchecked? Within 48 hours, the airline released a public statement, calling the incident deeply concerning and promising a full internal investigation. But as far as Michael Hawkins was concerned, the investigation had already started, and the evidence was overwhelming. What began as a secret inspection ended with the truth exposed on a national scale. And for one gate agent, it became a lesson in why you never know who you're talking to at the airport. What followed in the days after the incident was nothing short of a storm of accountability, both online and behind closed doors. After the video of the gate agent ripping up FAA Inspector Michael Hawkins' passport went viral, it didn't take long for public outrage to explode. Social media platforms were flooded with commentary, reactions, and demand for justice. People weren't just upset at the act itself. They were furious about what it represented. If she was bold enough to destroy a passport in public, what else happens that we don't see? This is why undercover inspections are necessary. She had no idea who she was messing with. Imagine doing this to someone without the power to fight back. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack trended worldwide. Activists, civil rights lawyers, travel bloggers, and even celebrities weighed in. Many shared personal stories of discrimination they had faced at airports. This incident wasn't an isolated case. It had opened the floodgates to a conversation long overdue. Meanwhile, inside the airline's corporate offices, things were moving just as fast. Michael Hawkins, now operating with full visibility and the weight of his federal role, submitted a detailed 17-page report to both the FAA and the Department of Transportation. The report outlined the sequence of events, violations of protocol, civil rights concerns, and recommendations for disciplinary action. And Michael didn't stop there. He included witness statements, video evidence from multiple angles, a breakdown of federal statutes violated, and even cited past complaints filed against the same airline and airport location. His report wasn't just a summary. It was a case for systemic reform. Within 72 hours, the airline issued a second, more formal public apology, this time addressing the issue directly. They acknowledged the actions of the gate agent, confirmed her immediate suspension, and promised a top-to-bottom review of training practices related to racial bias, passenger ID verification, conflict de-escalation, FAA compliance procedures. But the public wasn't satisfied with PR statements. People wanted consequences, and this time they got them. The gate agent in question was officially terminated within a week of the incident, after the airline concluded she had violated multiple company policies and federal travel regulations. Sources inside the airline claimed she had a history of complaints regarding her attitude and behavior, but until now, none had reached this level of visibility or accountability. In addition, the FAA launched a broader investigation into airport staff conduct nationwide, with Michael Hawkins now leading a task force dedicated to ensuring that this kind of incident never happens again. The FAA publicly confirmed that they were working closely with multiple airlines to implement mandatory civil rights and anti-bias training for all frontline employees, especially gate agents, security, and check-in staff. Michael also took the opportunity to speak out, not in anger, but with intention. In a rare interview, he said, "This wasn't about me. I have the badge and authority to hold people accountable. But what about the everyday traveler who doesn't? What happens when they're disrespected, profiled, or turned away, and no one's there to witness it?" This case highlights why we need stronger protections. The story of Michael D. Hawkins isn't just about a gate agent tearing a passport. It's not even just about racial profiling or FAA regulations. At its core, this story is about something much deeper: power, perception, and the dangerous consequences of prejudice. Let's break it down. Imagine being in Michael's shoes for a second. You're just trying to do your job. You're there to make sure passengers are treated fairly, that airlines follow federal laws, and that airport operations run smoothly. You've spent years working your way up to become one of the most respected aviation safety inspectors in the country. You've flown across states, risked your anonymity, and quietly helped improve the travel experience for millions of people. But in one instant, one moment of rash judgment by someone in uniform, you're treated like a criminal, like you don't belong, like your very presence is suspicious. Not because you raised your voice, not because you caused a scene, but because of the way you looked. And for thousands watching the video online, that part hit home the hardest. Michael had something most people don't have: a badge, a title, and the backing of a federal agency that gave him the power to stand up for himself in ways others might not be able to. He had tools, legal tools, to demand justice. And most importantly, he had a platform that people listened to. But what about the everyday traveler? What about the young black student flying for the first time? Or the immigrant worker who doesn't speak perfect English? Or the elderly passenger who's too tired to argue? What happens when they are wrongly accused or humiliated or denied boarding, with no badge to flash, no audience to back them up, and no viral video to tell their side of the story? That's why this incident matters. Because for every Michael Hawkins who gets justice, there are countless others who don't. This story reminds us that bias isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's quiet and smug, wrapped in a uniform, hiding behind a desk, and armed with authority that isn't being used fairly. The gate agent in this story didn't see Michael as a threat because of his behavior. She saw him as a threat because she assumed something about him the moment she laid eyes on him. She didn't know his name, didn't check his background, didn't follow policy. She acted based on perception, not facts. And perception, when clouded by prejudice, becomes a weapon. But here's the twist. She thought she held the power. She thought she could ruin his day, maybe his trip, with the flick of a wrist and the rip of a passport. She didn't know she was face to face with someone who had spent his career making sure people like her didn't get away with this exact kind of behavior. In that moment, the roles reversed. The gate agent, who believed she had the upper hand, became the one under scrutiny. And the man she tried to dismiss became the mirror reflecting her misconduct to the entire world. This is why undercover inspections exist. This is why accountability matters. Because real change doesn't come from PR statements or hashtags. It comes from people on the ground, paying attention, standing up, and documenting what happens when no one's watching, except someone actually is. Michael's story sparked change. The FAA launched new initiatives. Airlines updated their training. And conversations about racism and power in the travel industry reached new platforms. But let's not pretend this story ends with a neat bow. This is just one example. One small piece of a much bigger puzzle. There are still countless passengers treated unfairly every single day. Still gate agents, TSA officers, and airline employees who let personal bias guide professional judgment. So the real question is, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to look away when we see someone being mistreated? Are we going to accept that this is just how airports are? Or are we going to remember this story and demand better? Because airports aren't just places where planes take off. They're where people from all walks of life come together. They're crossroads of culture, race, age, background, and belief. And how people are treated in those spaces reflects who we are as a society. Michael Hawkins didn't have to shout. He didn't have to threaten. He just stood his ground, exposed the truth, and let the facts speak louder than anything else. And in doing so, he reminded us all, treat everyone with respect. Never judge a book by its cover. And always remember, the person you're looking down on today could be the one holding you accountable tomorrow.